We'll just wait a couple minutes before we start here for some more people to join us. Okay, Mr. McCann, why don't you go ahead and give us the translation announcement.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Desmond, and I'll be the interpreter for this forum. I'll also repeat this introduction in Spanish. The Zoom interpretation feature will be used in the Zoom meeting for English and Spanish support. All participants on this call must select their language of preference by clicking the language when the host turns on the interpretation feature in just a moment. This is found in the world icon located on your feature panel. Interpretation for this meeting will be conducted simultaneously. Thank you for your attention and collaboration, and thanks for joining us. Buenas tardes, me llamo Desmond y yo soy el intérprete para este foro. Se utilizará la función de interpretación de Zoom para soporte en inglés y español. Todos los participantes de esta llamada deben seleccionar su idioma de preferencia haciendo clic en el idioma correspondiente cuando el anfitrión active la función de interpretación dentro de algunos momentos. Dicha función se encuentra en el panel de herramientas en el icono del globo terráqueo. El modo de interpretación para esta reunión será el simultáneo. Gracias por su atención y colaboración y gracias por estar aquí con nosotros.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to take a moment and click on the globe and choose my language of preference. So you should do that as well. Good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Alagram, Superintendent of Schools for Sunnybell School District. And I have with me here a team for our last community forum of the school year. The team here I'll just kind of go around the panel as I see them. You met Mr. McCann, our interpreter. We appreciate you being here. Aaliyah Wilson is our communications coordinator. Jeremy Nishihara is our Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources and Information Systems. Dr. Tasha Dean is the Assistant Superintendent of Special Education and Student Services. Mala Ahuja is the Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services. Lori Van Gogh is our Chief Financial Officer. We will also be joined by Rob Smiley, who's our Chief Operations Officer shortly. Shana Reel is the incoming Assistant Principal for Fairwood Explorer School. How does that sound, Shana? Sounds even better to the principal of Fairwood Explorer, Rochelle Romander, who we're very happy to have here as well. So what we're going to do in this meeting is we'll try to be relatively brief in going through some slides and then provide opportunity for the community to ask questions and to provide input. That's really the purpose of this. The first part of the presentation, we'll have a slide on summer school in case there are questions about that. We'll have information and some slides about the start of the school year, August 18th, which we are very excited about. And we'll also have a significant amount of information. This perhaps is the newest information about our independent study program. And we know many of the people and parents and families in the audience will be interested in that information as well. So as I said, we'll try to go through it thoroughly, but quickly. And then if we go too fast, there's plenty of time for you to ask us questions at the end, because we really want this to be an opportunity for the community to have their questions answered and to provide input. Okay, so we can go to the next slide, Mr. Nishihara. Summer school, Ms. Ahuja, do you want to start, kind of walk us through that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to take you briefly through some of the highlights of our summer program, which we're looking forward to starting in about 3 weeks. We've already started some of the professional development. We've had teachers on board. They're excited. We're holding summer school at 5 sites this year, 3 elementary and both the middle schools. And the main purpose, as I may have shared before, is to provide as much access to the community as is feasible. So we have them located in different parts of our city. We are continuing with the Stanford Partnership, and we have several Stanford teacher graduates working with our teachers in the classrooms to support students and also to learn teaching in person, because they've done the whole year of their student teaching in a virtual environment. So that's going to be great for the teachers and for our students as well. We have a very robust enrollment at the elementary sites. We still have some room available at very select grade levels. So if you're interested, talk to your school site principal, front office, they can give you information. We definitely have room at the middle schools. We know middle schoolers aren't overly excited about being in summer school. However, I just want to put a plug in for how engaging and exciting this summer is going to be, because not only do we have our most amazing teaching staff work during the summer program, our focus is on math and literacy, definitely deepening understanding and knowledge about both, but we also set aside a significant time for the day on special projects. We're calling them passion projects. And this is something that both teachers are excited about and we want students to be excited about, because student engagement, we know, is key to student learning. If they're not engaged and not excited and not motivated, the learning does get affected. So we have the time set aside for that, and teachers are busy planning all kinds of exciting things, from arts and crafts to Mexican folklore, to some dancing, to some music performances, to theater, to games, just all kinds of different things. So that's going to be a fun and engaging part of summer school that we're looking forward to. Getting parents involved in also what their child is doing, having parents and families know what's happening at the school site is really important. We have also been really fortunate this year to offer extended learning opportunity, which will continue our summer program. It doesn't end at 12:30, but families have the option to sign up till 5:30 every evening, so that students have more time to be engaged in social interactions, in deeper learning, and also more opportunities for physical education and play, which we know is so important. We will be following safety guidelines that we expect will be in place for the beginning of the school year. And it's really preparing us in many ways at the instructional level, the safety level, with technology, really how school is going to flow, because some of our sites have about 250 to 300 students, which is a pretty robust enrollment. It's fair. The numbers are way more than we currently have at the sites. So it's getting us ready to see how the process is, the flow, how many gates we need to have open, what's working, what's not, what we need, so that when we come back August 18th, we are all ready and really excited, as Dr. Gallagher mentioned, to start a new school year. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll jump in for the first day of school, August 18th. Like I said, we're very excited about that. And I appreciated how Ms. Ahuja focused on how summer school is going to really be a bridge to this first day of school, just like last year was. Our summer school was all virtual last year, and it built towards a pretty successful, actually a very successful start to the virtual school year. So that's kind of our thinking again this year, if we can recreate that pattern, but this time building back up to in-person with the safety measures, and also getting to see our students and what their needs are and how we can support them, and importantly, in supporting our staff. So in the end, for the safety guidelines, we will follow the county Department of Health guidelines as they are described to us. What we expect them to be, and this is from all the meetings that I've attended, at the county level, the past really several months, is that masks will be required. Ventilation, there'll be ventilation requirements, which we've actually been meeting those ventilation requirements already this school year. We have in all the classrooms, so we have 10 school sites and a district office. Of all those rooms, there are not many. There's this very small minority of rooms that don't meet the required ventilation requirements, just the way the HVAC systems are set up. But we have already purchased air scrubbers, for lack of a better term, to mitigate the concerns in those rooms. So we are well positioned to handle the ventilation concerns, and we'll continue with screening. And I see that Mr. Smiley just is joining the meeting. If you have any questions about ventilation, he's the expert on that. So getting back to our screening, we'll continue with the roofness system, and that's worked really, really well with the students and staff that have been on campus this year. So we'll continue with that. So those are the three areas that the county is telling us will be required. At some point, now I imagine we'll get from the audience, because every time I mention masks, I get questions from the audience about at what point will the restrictions on masks be eased? And my answer to that is, I don't know, and we'll follow the county guidance. So I'm, at some point in time, I don't know if it's going to be during next year, it may be, or if it's going to be the following year. I imagine it would be sometime during next year that masks, the requirements for that will be eased, but we really just don't know what that is yet. And again, we're going to follow the county guidance on that. Vaccinations is the last bullet here. Some exciting news, and this we haven't even rolled this out anywhere. We just got confirmation that we're going to be able to have a vaccination clinic at Sunnyvale Middle School next week, which is really exciting. It's going to focus on our students who are age 12 and above, and more details on that will become available. We're going to start with them, and then that's the priority. And then we'll, of course, include other community members in our immediate community, include them in that vaccination clinic. We're also working with the county to provide a similar clinic at Columbia Middle School, if not next week, then very soon. And those clinics offer the Pfizer vaccine. So anyone who gets the Pfizer vaccine, as you know, needs to come back 3 weeks later. So there'll be another clinic 3 weeks later. And my understanding is that if individuals over the age of 18, community members want the vaccine, that I believe they intend to have the Johnson & Johnson vaccine available at those sites as well. So that's really exciting that'll be at Sunnyvale Middle School next week. More information will start flowing on that tomorrow. We'll start getting that out. I just got confirmation earlier this afternoon. And then we're going to put together a similar event for Columbia Middle School in the near future, which will be the same sort of cadence. We'll have that the first event, and then another event 3 weeks later, and then if it's necessary to have another one after that, we'll look at that. So that's exciting. Our goal is to lower the barriers to vaccinations so that all of our students can be vaccinated by the first day of school. Whenever I mention vaccinations, people ask about requirements for vaccinations. At this point, the state has not provided any requirements for vaccinations for students, staff, parents, anything like that. And that's another area where we will focus on and follow the guidance of the county and the state. So if there's more questions about vaccinations, I'll certainly welcome those. So if we can go to the next slide. So Restorative Restart is how we are going to describe the start of the school year. There's a document that's been provided by an education think tank out of Stanford called PACE that focuses on a restorative restart. It's been signed on to, I talked about this in my superintendent's newsletter a couple of weeks ago, signed on to by really every educational group in the state. And what it talks about is like, yes, academics will be important. We need to assess students for where they are individually. Some will have done very well, some will have done just fine, and many will have not done as well this past school year. And so that's a part of the restorative restart, is to do that assessment. But another piece of the restorative restart is to really assess how students are doing social emotionally, to rebuild community. So rebuild community of students, rebuild community of families, rebuild communities of teachers and staff. So to do that intentionally within the first 6 weeks of school. So that's a lot to do within the first 6 weeks of school, but really to emphasize we're coming back together. We need to rebuild our communities. We need to assess where we are. We need to not assume, we need to be aware and alert for any deficits that might be there, but not assume deficits. There's a lot of strengths that will have been garnered and developed during this very challenging year. And we'll celebrate those, but we're also not going to be naive. We're going to try to assess as honestly as we can where the needs are. So after that 6 weeks, we can continue with those themes of being restorative and being intentional about the supports that we provide throughout the year. So these bullets kind of go through a lot of the elements, some of the major elements of our focus, like what's going to be different next year, what's going to be available to support students and families and staff. And those are the groups that we really need to talk about, because all three of those create our Sunnyvale community: students, families, and staff. So first off, something called an equitable outcome teacher for each site. So equitable outcomes teachers are additional teachers, we call them full-time equivalents. So additional staffing for each site that principals will have to deploy in the areas of greatest need. So the idea is to identify students who have needs academically or perhaps even social emotionally, and principals will deploy them on their site. So that's additional staff. On top of that, I will say that we've held our teacher FTE, or our teacher staffing, really pretty steady the last couple of years. And I've directed staff not to decrease it next year, but to hold it steady next year, plus adding these equitable outcomes teachers. So we're actually going to have more teachers and fewer students, significantly more teachers and fewer students. So that will create across the district, on average, smaller class size. That doesn't mean that if you're in second grade at a particular school, your child won't have 24 students in the class, but on average across the schools, we'll have smaller class sizes. And principals will look and see like where the greatest areas of needs are, so that they can then deploy equitable outcomes teachers. Lower down in the list here, bullet number 4, that refers to paraeducators. So we're going to have additional paraeducators. Those are teachers' aides, if you will, to provide in-class support for students. So that's going to be another resource available to principals as they look at their students, the class sizes in their school, where the students have the highest needs, so they can deploy those resources where appropriate. There's about 15 paraeducators in that group, and those come from the staff we used in the supervised learning groups this past year. We're redeploying them to support in classroom for students, so that's exciting. So I skipped 2 bullets that are super important. So we're adding 2 social workers to our social worker corps, and I think that brings us up to 8. Am I right about that, Dr. Dean? We have 8? About right, okay. So that's going to provide additional access to services. We know we've identified many families that will benefit from these services, and we're sure that as we go through our restorative restart, the first 6 weeks of school and on, we'll identify more. So that's a significant investment we're making, in addition to expanding our current counseling services. So those are some areas in social emotional outside of the classroom supports that we'll be providing to students and families. I'm going to jump down to Acknowledge Alliance, which is another social emotional support. And really what Acknowledge Alliance does is that's an outside agency we've partnered with for a number of years. Their mission is to provide or to help adults increase their resilience so that they can help students increase theirs. So they work with our teachers and staff to focus on resilience. It's been an extraordinarily challenging year for all of us, including our teachers. And so we're going to make sure that all of our staff have access to support services so that they can be their best for your students and for our families as they enter into this new year. All of our staff are going to receive training in trauma-informed practices, and our goal is to provide a baseline of training on that and then to build on that base as we move through the year. But we think that's going to be, well, that's always important, but coming out of the pandemic, and that's going to be especially important and really consistent with a lot of the social emotional work that we've done over the years. And finally, last but certainly not least, we're going to offer after-school targeted intervention and support. We hope to have teachers provide that where available. Sometimes teachers aren't always available because they work pretty darn hard during the day and preparing for the next day of instruction. So in many cases, it may be offered by paraeducators who are highly trained to provide intervention and support to students. So this is not, I was going to say, merely homework support, although there may be some homework support, but really it's about intervention and support to help students with any learning that they need to do to get caught up to grade level. So I imagine there might be a lot of questions about that, but we'll move on now and allow the questions when we get to the question and answer section. So now I'm going to hand it off to our fearless team from Fairwood, Ms. Romander and Ms. Reel, to talk about the Independent Study Program. And I guess Mr. Nishihara helps with this a little bit too.
Thank you, Dr. Gallagher. Hi again, my name is Shana Reel, and I'm the incoming assistant principal for Fairwood Elementary, and we're going to share some information, just a brief snippet of the information that has been shared with families that expressed an interest in independent study. A frequently asked questions email was sent out that has much more detailed information, but this evening we are kind of doing some simple and highlighting some of the more questions that we got more often. So we'll go to the next slide. So highlighting here again, the Independent Study Program will be for K through 8 students. And we will be housing our elementary students at Fairwood, and the students that are enrolled in middle school will be part of the Sunnyvale Middle School. Another area is that residency needs to be within the Sunnyvale School District for the enrollment the entire time a student is enrolled in. Another requirement that we are having for the program next year is a 1 hour of in-person instruction with the teacher each week. So students will be coming onto campus and they will be meeting with their teacher for some one-on-one time. Again, also, we will note that we will be following, as Mr. Gallagher said, all of the county guidelines in terms of safety precautions and protocols. During the remainder of the week, students will be working independently on work assigned from the teacher. And again, these assignments will be tailored to students to help meet their individual needs. So we'll go on to the next one. As the Independent Study Program gets started and continues through the year, the district adopted curriculums will guide the instruction that the teacher will be providing for the students. We will be also utilizing a learning management program called Edgenuity. This would be new to the elementary students, but it was used by our middle school students this year and they found success with it. Differentiation will also be provided to support each student at their instructional level. Exiting the program, at this particular time, to ease with the transition, we are looking at the end of each trimester to allow for students to exit and move back into a traditional classroom. Those would occur in November, March. At that time, if a student is moving back into the traditional classroom, every effort will be made to have the student return to their home school. But if the home school is at maximum capacity, they will be placed in a different district school until space is available at their home school. And then I think we have our last slide. So later, families will be receiving a survey, and we are asking families to commit. And the options again next year will be number one, enrolling in the long-term independent study program, following and based on the information shared in this presentation, as well as what was sent home in the frequently asked questions. And the other option that is going to be had is a traditional instructional program where students will be in person 5 days a week So that is on our end for the presentation portion. Thank you.
Okay, so that is the end of our presentation. So that's relatively short. At this point, we welcome any questions or comments from the community, and Ms. Wilson will help facilitate that.
Yes, thank you. So at this point, if anyone wants to use the raise hand feature, I'll go ahead and call on the people in the order they are received. All right, first up we have Rami and followed by Sandy Wambold. Rami, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yep. Hi, thank you for answering my questions. I have 3 questions. One of them is there going to be any concern that there won't be enough space in the independent study this coming school year? Only because I know this school year it was originally kind of hard to get into the independent study program. So that's my first question. My second question is, students that have been in the independent study program this past year, is there some sort of like priority for the next school year? And then my third question is the meeting with the teacher, is there going to be flexible hours for full-time working parents? Thank you.
Thanks, Romy. I think Mr. Nishihara, can you take the first 2, and then maybe Ms. Romander, Ms. Reel, if you could take the third one.
Yeah, so regarding space, I know that was kind of a jump start at the beginning of this year. We are taking kind of a running start at this. So I'm hoping that we can accommodate the interest expressed by the community. So I don't have a concern yet regarding staffing, just given the number of parents that have expressed interest, plus when we send out the commitment form later this week, and then we're in the process of hiring staffing right now. So yeah, I don't have that concern yet. There might be something if the school year gets going and then additional students try to add into the program, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So I guess that relates to your second question. There is no priority per se, because this is not a school of choice or something to that effect. It's this other separate program, but related to the first part about concern, not having a concern regarding space at this time, we're going to hopefully accommodate as many folks as we possibly can, given the staffing. So it really will depend on the number of folks coming back within commitment, but we are, again, simultaneously hiring, whereas at the beginning of this year, we were trying to spin up the distance learning and the independent study program at the same time. So we have that going for us.
All right, and I'd be happy to address the last question, which was about flexibility in terms of meeting times with the teacher. So our teachers do have contracted hours that they are contracted to work. This year, some of the teachers were able to allow for some flexibility to provide some additional options of times. So that would also be, again, kind of up to whether or not the teacher is able to have that flexibility to offer additional times at a later opportunity. So I won't say that it can be guaranteed that that would be an option, but if the teacher is able, then we would certainly want to be as flexible as we can.
Thank you. And we have 3 more hands raised currently. We have Sandy Wambold next, followed by Patrick Mukherjee.
Hello. I wanted to follow up on the person who asked about the flexibility for working parents. If you could include a question in the survey so that you could indicate if you have a lot of flexibility in your schedule that you might be willing to exchange with a parent who, a teacher parent slot with another parent and their child. So that way people would know you'd be the first person to contact and say, hey, do you think you could move your time? So you might add that to your survey. So it's just a comment there. For independent study and IEPs, with the times, independent study attendance is tied to the assignments completed. But this year, there didn't seem to be any provision for the additional time that children spend on their IEP programs. Will there be any change in that policy for next year? Because it really does affect the quote unquote attendance of the child if they have an additional, say, 3 hours of IEP work for their program. For instance, my son was attending RSP a couple times a week. He was meeting with his RSP teacher, etc. And there was an awful lot of hours that weren't getting, I think, counted very much on attendance. So I was just wondering what will be sort of the attendance policies with regard to additional time required for IEPs.
Thank you. I like your first suggestion about, I don't know if we have to put it on the initial survey. Ms. Romander and Ms. Reel can kind of work that out, but the idea of what parents are flexible and working that out with the teacher so that we have to think of ourselves as a community whenever we can. So I think that's a great idea. And Dr. Dean, you want to kind of take the IEP questions?
Yes, I'm not sure I fully understood the time factor in the past, but we'll leave that there and move forward. But essentially, any student who would be an independent study, we would convene with whoever their teacher is, and then whoever their case manager is in special education. They would reconvene following that, and because it would require a change in the IEP anyway, and so those details would be flushed out with regards to hours and what's being done and not done, but those two teachers will be working in tandem very closely together.
Thank you. Next up, we have Patrick, followed by Pamela S., and then Sriram.
Yeah, hi. This is actually Patrick's father. I'm using his iPad as this is the one he uses for school. But the question I have is, so Patrick is in preschool. He has speech apraxia, so he gets IEP services, etc. And so since he's under 12 and there won't be a vaccine available, I am hoping that me and other parents can possibly convince folks to continue virtual learning, because we do like virtual preschool for him and other kids, because we just don't know what are the long-term implications of if a child does contract COVID, even though we know it won't be likely lethal for them. So I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? I think the other reason that I wanted to ask this question is because speech apraxia virtually isn't obviously as good as it is in person. So, but it is better than nothing, right? And at this age, he really needs the speech therapy and interaction with other kids, etc. And we recognize that. So virtual isn't ideal, but that is the one that we're comfortable with at this point.
Do you want to take that one, Dr. Dean? It's kind of a mix of, I was trying to decide whose square that was.
Yes, absolutely. So I don't have a definitive answer, but the way we would address that is trying to meet the individualized needs based upon the child's IEP. At this time, we have not been given a clearance that we could offer virtual opportunities in our preschool programming. But we would try to accommodate for uniqueness that may be there for health concerns as a part of our commitment to integrate and transition students back into classrooms. So not sure what his program would look like, but we would definitely work to accommodate. And many of our specialists, like our speech, will be providing some continual teletherapy services for families who will benefit from that and who are also actually achieving and being more successful through that platform. So we will keep what we've learned and use it for health reasons, but also just for the overall educational outcomes for students.
Thank you.
And then we have two more hands left. We have Pamela S. followed by Sriram.
And hello, thanks for sharing the information. So I have two questions. So the first one is, will the student meet with the same teacher each week? Is the teacher assigned to the independent learning program specifically, or it's just the temporary position, or if you have a team to work with a group of students? So the second one is, will the teacher customize the study materials based on the student's learning process? For example, if the students are above or lower their grade level, or will the teacher adjust the process during the whole academic year? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pamela. I'd be happy to take that one. So the first question was, would the student meet with the same teacher each week? Yes, we are currently hiring our independent study teachers for next school year, and then students would be assigned to a specific teacher, so they would meet with the same teacher every week. We want to make sure to have that consistency for them. The second question around teacher customizing the instruction and the materials for the student. Just like in a general instructional program, we want to make sure that we're hitting that right spot for every student. And so we do take into account what are the individual needs of the student. When we look at how we tailor that, we can do that in a couple of ways. We can, if the student needs additional support, we can provide that additional support and scaffolding to fit their needs. And then the other area, the other side of that could be that the student needs a greater depth of learning. So they might have all of the skills that they're needed for that basic conceptual understanding, but they might need to deepen those skills. So that's what we call extension or extending the learning. We typically aren't going to push into further grade level content areas. Instead, we really want to deepen that understanding and make sure that the student develops a real good, hearty understanding of the content so that they can apply that knowledge into a lot of new and various scenarios. So yes, we would certainly be customizing instruction just as we do in the traditional instructional program to make sure that we're meeting the needs of each student.
Thank you so much. Then next up we have Sriram followed by Patrick.
Might be Patrick's dad.
Oh yes, Patrick's dad, that's right, thank you.
Hi, this is Sriram's mom. I have two questions. The first one is, if parents that are opting for independent study, is it a possibility for them to expect kids to be in a cohort, not just an independent kid, but a cohort study? Like I'm just assuming that you guys understand what a cohort is. So is that a possibility? And if that is, like, is it like based on the parents' availability, or is it actually pre-planned from the management side? And the second question is, even if parents are up for the independent studying against all the odds that are right there right now, if the parents are not totally successful in terms of being able to teach specific subjects for the kids, how does that get taken care of, especially with aligning them from academics perspective with other kids when it comes to a trimester level merge or whatever you called out later? Those are the two questions I had.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd be happy to take those again. So in regards to parents opting for independent study and would there be a cohort option, we are currently not planning for cohorts. We are planning for independent study. So this is an option that is being provided with the expectation that students would be working independently on their program. One of the pieces of feedback we did receive from this year was that it would be nice to have an opportunity for some socialization, for some some community activities. And so that is something that we want to be aware of in case that's something of interest to families. We know that some families are choosing independent study because they don't want to mix and mingle. They want to be able to stay safely within their comfort level. But we also recognize that some families are interested in having that community building. And that's one of the reasons why we're focusing the program onto school sites this year, because the students in independent study would be a part of either the Fairwood community or the Sunnyvale Middle School community, so that they could participate in after school type activities. For example, if Fairwood Explorer has a dance and your student wants to come to the dance, we want them there so that they can get some of that social opportunity. In regards to the second question regarding if the parent is struggling to maybe keep up with the studies for the student, that would be something that you would want to be in communication with the independent study teacher about, just like you would in a regular traditional classroom. You want to reach out to the teacher, explain what it is that you're noticing at home, perhaps what are the things that this child is struggling with, or what are the concepts that you feel they're not really understanding as well. And that's why we're having that one-to-one time with the teacher every week, because then that can be an opportunity for the teacher to be able to try to address some of those concerns. So certainly that communication between parents and the independent study teacher will be really important for addressing any concerns that you see propping up during the time that your student's enrolled.
Thank you. And next up, we have Patrick's dad, followed by Sarah.
That's funny. I'll always be known as Patrick's dad. So I have kind of a follow-up from my earlier question. So is independent study available for preschool? And once our son is able to get his shot, can we go back to normal preschool once that starts?
Dr. Dean, you want to take this preschool? That's your area.
Yeah, yes. Independent study would not be an option for preschool, just from the developmental level and what students need. So kind of going back to the earlier question, I think we will work on some virtual options. It also depends on if students are a part of state preschool or special education, special day classrooms, because we have different guidelines that actually guide what and how we do things as a part of our state preschool. I think that the message I want to convey, though, is we will work with families to be flexible, to provide them as much support in the best way possible, and even maybe some individualized coming in, like the individual sessions that Ms. Romando has talked about with regards to what's needed for preschool students on a one-to-one basis potentially as well. So no independent study, but definitely being flexible to get students what they need.
And then actually, if I can jump in for two reasons. One, I wanted to just make sure I said Patrick's dad one more time. So hello, Patrick's dad. But you hit on a point about student vaccination for ages, especially for 5 to 11. We are taking that into account. Rochelle and Shana had the foresight that we're going to be asking that on the commitment survey, just to see, engage that individual aspect for a family's choice for independent study, to see if that's going to make a difference. So we are asking that on the commitment survey, just for that planning aspect, for, I guess, orderly on ramping and off ramping from the program, if that's a consideration. So thank you, Patrick's dad.
Next up, we have Sarah, followed by Romy, followed by Annette Johnson. Sarah, if you'd like to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to say, as a parent, we have appreciated the independent study option more than we could ever express this year. We will appreciate it for the rest of our lives. It made a world of difference for this difficult time. And I know most other districts did not offer anything similar. So I really, really appreciate Sunnyvale School District being a leader and being ahead of the curve with so many things. Thank you. That also comes from our experience of having actually 3 teachers this year for the 1 kindergarten class in independent study due to substitutes, and still the program shone through as being consistent and really well planned, which was just incredible for its first year in this form. And then I had one question. So we were in kindergarten, so I don't know how different this was from other grades, but this year we had 2 hours and 20 minutes of work minutes that needed to be accounted for each day. And I know if we were in a full school, I think it would be 5 hours and 15 minutes. So I'm just wondering, will that be different? That could actually be a big difference for independent study parents who are used to this year. If we are accounting for 5 hours and 15 minutes worth of time, that would be a lot more work at home for the students than it might have been this year. I just don't know how the other grades varied with that.
That might be a tricky one for Rochelle, so I don't know.
I can just address that broadly, because we have a state requirement for instructional minutes for every grade level. And I think the conversation that needs to follow up this question of yours, Sarah, is do we align the instructional minute expectations that are the state level, or do we align it to what other students are getting in our classrooms, which is way more than the amount required by the state, but we don't want to shortchange any of our students. So I think we can consider this and come up with a solution that meets both requirements.
Thank you.
And next up, we have Romy, followed by Annette Johnson, and last up is Nana. Oh, one more popped up, but Romy, you're up first.
Hi, it's me again. Thank you. I wanted to follow up with what Sarah said, how much I appreciate the independent study program. We have a high risk patient at home, so this has just worked out perfectly for us. And I was stressed when I first heard that it wasn't being offered prior to this meeting. So I'm really thankful for that. And I have two silly questions. My daughter's homeschool is Ellis, but we signed up for Vargas, and she was in kinder this year. And since we never attended Vargas in person, is that going to still be considered her school once she gets vaccinated and goes back to in person? My second question is, will the meetings take place at Fairwood? And again, thank you. I really appreciate the independent study program.
Thanks, Romy.
So Romy, whatever school is, I'm assuming that you were referring to open enrollment. So if you're enrolling into Vargas, then yes, Vargas would consider to be your homeschool if you were accepted and exited out of the independent study program. But if I misunderstood you, go ahead and shoot me an email and I'll clarify. Because again, if you're living in the Ellis attendance area and you were overflowed, there's a couple of variables that could have happened. So ping me and directly and I could follow up.
And then in regards to the second question, which was where would the instruction take place? If the student is an elementary student, then the instruction would take place at Fairwood Elementary School. And if the student is a middle school student, it would take place at Sunnyvale Middle School.
Okay, and next up we had Annette Johnson, followed by Nana, followed by Sylvia.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to echo what the two other mothers mentioned. I have a 6th grader and a 2nd grader, and the independent study program was absolutely amazing. We were totally supported, and it was just high level, really an amazing, unforgettable year. And I wanted to also echo what Patrick's dad said. We're not comfortable sending our 8-year-old back to school until she's vaccinated. So we would like to start an independent study. And then when she's vaccinated, we'd like to send her back to her home school. You know, we're deeply connected to that school community. So I was just wondering, is there any way that she could, you know, families that feel like us, that they're just not ready to send their unvaccinated kid back to school in person? Is there some way that in the survey we could commit to saying we'll do independent study up until whatever trimester, and then we want our child back in our home school? Is there any way that might be possible?
Want me to take it, Jamie?
Go for it, Rochelle.
All right. So yes, you're in the survey. One of the questions that will be asked is, would you plan to send your child back to their homeschool once your child is vaccinated? But I do want to highlight what Ms. Reel shared in the presentation, which was that even in marking that, we cannot guarantee that a space would be available in your homeschool at that time. And that's because we have incoming registrations throughout the school year, and we have an obligation to make sure to seat those students in their homeschool if a space is available. So we can't hold a space for a student, even if your plan is to return once vaccinations happen, because we don't have information like when the vaccinations will happen, how long that will be between then and the end of the trimester. And there are some parents who might indicate that initially, but then decide that they like the program and that they want to stay in it anyway. So as Ms. Reel shared, if a space is not available in your homeschool and you elect to leave the program at the end of the trimester, then you would be placed in a neighboring school that has an available space until a space were to open at your homeschool.
Thank you. And then next up we have Sylvia, followed by Sriram, followed by Caroline.
Hello, my name is Sylvia Stoykov, and there is no question. I just want to express my gratitude, and I'm so thankful for you expanding the program. And that's it. Thank you.
You're very
Thank you.
welcome, Sylvia.
We appreciate that. Thank you. Next up is Caroline. Oh, sorry, Sriram was next, followed by Caroline.
Hi, sorry to bring up another question. I wanted to ask, like, this independent study, how does it work for kids that are on IEP? There was nothing highlighted on that. Is it an option for kids that are on IEP who is like a second grader?
Dr. Dean.
There is an option for students who have an IEP. It would be based upon the student's FAPE, their free appropriate public education, and whether or not their goals and expectations that are on their IEP can be fully implemented in independent study. That would be like the #1 element that will be looked at, and then kind of go from there. But that's the critical piece. The IEP will kind of drive the decision making.
Thank you. So next up is Caroline, followed by Nana.
Oh, 我会了。Hello, my name is Caroline. I just have some question because I was just couldn't unmute it, and I figured out there's a button that I can unmute. I have a question that I think it's more specific about middle school. So my son is going to middle school. I think he needs some, he was in the independent study this year, and it was a very good experience, but I do think he needs some social opportunities. So this year he's going to middle school. So we would like him to maybe, because it looks like the independent study choices really still have a lot of social aspect in it. So we want him to go back to in-person, but if in some point we think he's still better suited in an independent study, is there an opportunity to let him go back to independent study? That's my first question. The second one is, I heard some people saying they want to add the social aspect to independent study program. They say, since you belong to the school, if the school has after school activity, you can participate in that. Can you elaborate? What does that mean for middle school? Does that mean he can do some elective courses or clubs or PE in school, or just like the PTA organized activities that he can join? Okay, thank you. That's my 2 questions.
Those are great questions. Thank you. So I think the first question that you had was in regards to if you enroll in independent study and then choose to leave the program and go back to the traditional instructional model, would you be able to re-enroll in the independent study program if you found that that was something that you felt was needed? And that's a bit tricky. As Mr. Nishihara shared earlier, we are making plans for space within the independent study based on the current interest. And we're trying to make sure that we can meet the need of those who are interested. However, if you were to enter the program and leave the program, and we had somebody else who had been waiting because they expressed an interest later, and they entered and took your place, then I couldn't guarantee that there would be a place if you wanted to re-enter into the program. So I think that that would be something that we would have to address at the time that it happened. And then in regards to social opportunities, in regards to electives or clubs, most of those take place during the school day. And as a result, they would not be an option for your student to participate in because we are going to be still working on making sure that we are abiding by the independent study model in terms of the instructional day. So the student would be expected to be participating in those independent activities during the instructional day. However, we do want to provide some opportunities for socialization. And so that's why we're looking at things like possibly after school things, maybe after school sports, we're looking into that. We're also looking into, like you said, the PTA or PTO events, any type of after school community activity, those would all be options. And then depending on parent interest and teacher availability, there may be an opportunity for a kind of a social time or something like that, that would be an after hours time and after school hours time that could be provided as well. So we're certainly keeping those opportunities open, but because this is going to be something new and because we don't know what the interests of our parents and the community are yet, I won't be able to give you specific details, but we are open to those ideas.
Thank you. Next up, we have Nana, followed by, oh, just Nana. Oh, I'm going to promote them to panelists just based on their settings. Nana, if you'd like to go ahead and, there you go.
And I think we have time for one more after Nana. So I think Daisy will be the last question.
Okay, thank you. I have two questions, and then my questions are about the elementary school. So it sounds like everybody is really excited to have an in-person school back. That is great. But then my first question is, what happens when somebody get COVID in the school? So what's the plan when like one of the student in the class, in my child class, got COVID, or school staff member got COVID? In that case, what's the plan as a school district is the first question. And then the second question is, in the beginning of the presentation, like we are probably we will have the smaller size class, but then I'd like to know, I would like to get a little better idea for the numbers of the students in one class. Thank you.
I want to be sure I understood fully the information regarding the COVID and what we would do if a student have it. If I have it correct, like what our protocol will be, I think is what your question was. And that kind of aligns with Dr. Gallagher said, is we'll be following the county's guidelines, and those protocols have actually been changing weekly, monthly since the beginning of this process. So at that time, we're not certain today what that protocol will be, but whatever it is, we will be following that, and we would also be communicating that with the community in a way so that they would know what that protocol is.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Then the question on the staffing and the class sizes, Dr. Gallagher kind of said it right. This is more of an art than a science, because kids do not come in packages of 32 and 24. But we did learn that, there was a strong draw, and I think some other parents said it tonight, about returning to their neighborhood school. So our efforts are to keep, overall just looser class sizes is how we refer to it, for a couple of reasons. But one of the main ones as well is to make sure that we're limiting to the greatest extent possible of overflow, where if we were staffing a little bit tighter, and a new neighborhood student moves in the second day of school, there's a potential to have them overflow out to another site and then come back when there's space becomes available, because obviously everyone wants to attend their homeschool. This causes some disruption back and forth, as you can imagine, of the overflow site and then coming back. So we're just trying to, again, keep overall lower class sizes, because again, if we have less students with the same amount of staffing, it's going to be overall lower, but it's not going to be a mandated class size, because in theory, that could actually then create more overflow out if we're just locking down and having specific class sizes. So that's the best answer that we can give, is that it's going to be overall lower than the class sizes that 24 and 32, but it will look different per grade level, per sites, because again, students don't come in neat little packages, but it will be, I would say, a noticeable difference than in the past. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, you're still here. Yeah, thank you. Okay.
And then the last person we have is Daisy.
Hi, good evening. So my question is regarding for after school. My daughter will be doing the partial in person. So I know Columbia Middle School has KLAS program, and she was part of it while she was at Parkers Elementary School, and we love it. And she gets that extra help because she prefers to get help from others than her mommy. So I know Sunnyvale Middle School does not have that. Will there be any kind of help or assistance for after school programs for kids that need that extra help or work better and are more receptive to actually getting help outside of home?
Ms. Ahuja, do you want to take that one?
So we currently do not have a similar program at Sunnyvale Middle School. So I'm not sure how I can help on this one. We are going to continue to have it at Columbia Middle. The KLAS program is run by federal aid, which provides assistance to schools that have certain targeted populations that we're serving. We will have a conversation with the Sunnyvale Middle School staff. In the past, they have had some homebook centers or support places, but there is nothing currently that's in the works for a regular after-school program 5 days a week at Sunnyvale Middle School.
Okay, thank you. And I want to thank all of our attendees. We appreciate the questions. The questions help us get better. They help us refine our thinking and our planning. Also appreciate you thanking us. We heard lots of community input about coming up with a program for kindergarten through second grade. And so we're putting that together as a result of community input. So thank you very much. This was recorded, so it'll be available for others on the website and on YouTube, I think is where it is. We look forward to a fantastic end to the school year, where you can tell from everyone's presentations, we're very excited about summer school, to have so many kids back in person, and we can't wait until August 18th. So thank you again, and have a good evening.